How long
I
was it
think
going on?
I think it was like 15 minutes or something like that.
Okay, that's
And
not too bad.
yeah, hello everyone and welcome to the BetTALker podcast. Today we have here with us Matthew Curtis from L&L Europe. Hello and welcome.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
All right. Uh, I normally ask to everyone in the podcast, you know, tell us a little bit how did you end up, working in the gambling industry as head of safer gambling. Normally the stories they're a bit random. So how did you end up in gambling?
Well, yeah, just like everyone else, I think my story's a little random. If you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago, what I'd be doing now, working in the gambling industry is definitely not what I would have said to you. That seems to be pretty common in the gaming industry, to be honest. My first job was working for an online fashion company, so this is very different. Um, yeah, I never really had much personal interest in gambling, much knowledge of it before moving to Malta in 2016. Um, but the workspace in Malta is dominated massively by gambling. So if you wanted to move here, especially back in 2016, you're basically typecast into working for a gambling company at that point. My understanding of gambling at the time was pretty negative, to be honest with you, just down to kind of all the news that you'd see, the kind of taboo nature um, of the products itself. But I think that pretty quickly went away after seeing, from the inside, how it actually operates. And that's only got better with time. But yeah, I moved to Malta in 2016, started working for a few different operators in customer support, which again seems pretty common for people in the industry. And then generally just gravitated towards the safer gaming arm of the business because I thought it would be a nice jump from customer support to safer gaming because it's nice to do something on behalf of the customers and not just for the business directly.
Okay. Uh, I'm very curious. Tell me more about your work in fashion industry. What were you doing? Like
Yeah, so
designing clothes or
no,
something?
no. Sadly, I'm not that creative. It was
Okay.
mostly like in a support capacity, so handling customer communications and some social media, kind
Okay.
of like posting and stuff like that as well. Um, it's quite a big one in the UK. I'd say middle of the road, medium range sort of fashion. But if you see how I dress at the conferences, you'll know that I definitely am not one of the designers.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it's you get chefs. That when they're at home they just eat beans on toast. So
There's
you
nothing wrong
don't
with
know.
beans on toast. That's a
Yeah.
staple of British cuisine.
What do you think you'll be doing if you were not working in gambling?
When I was younger, I always wanted to be a psychologist. To be honest with you, that was the studies that I was doing up until my late teens. It turns out that I liked that. I liked the idea of it more than I actually liked it in practice. Um, you being one yourself, Pedro, I'm not sure if you had a similar journey, but doing all the cases and the historical stuff was amazing. But just usual academic testing and stuff like that, it just didn't really sit with me so well, um,
I mean,
to be
if I'm
honest.
if I'm honest, I did struggle because there were stuff that I was really passionate about, and I've read it once and I remember it, but then there were other stuff like I don't know, like statistics, and it's like, oh my god, why do I have to learn this? Oh, because if the computer breaks, you still can do the research.
Of
Okay, if the
course,
computer breaks, I just wait until it's fixed.
of course, and it's quite hard to look back historically at someone like Freud and Jung, and like view them both as kind of equals, if that makes sense. Once you know a
Yeah.
little bit more about them, so I had a hard time not putting my own bias and opinions in the kind of like reviews that we were doing, which isn't really what you want. You're supposed to kind of follow,
But
the teachings of old.
I suppose this is like Jung, Freud, and all that is like physics. So you're not going to say, oh, Archimedes was wrong, or or Newton was wrong. Okay, things have moved on. But some people get a bit stuck on, oh, but Freud is like, okay,
Yeah, it's true. Well, he
you
was
know,
quite an interesting character, wasn't he? I think
yeah,
that puts a few people off. But you're right. It's the progression over time, right? Like Freud
yeah,
leads on to something else that leads on to something else.
yeah, yeah. And oh, it's can you get your company to sponsor you to do a degree or something, or a postgrad or
I
something
might
like that?
ask. I might
Yeah,
ask after this. I'll let you know, Pedro.
you should, because it's I think, it's an opportunity. It's good for. I mean, maybe I don't know if I'm, maybe it's not good for you. It's sometimes a bit like self-inflicted damage. I'm doing a PhD now. And every other day it's like, oh my god, where did I get myself into so much trouble?
I must say, talking of like my life and career progression, going from wanting to study like psychology to working for a fashion company to working now in safer gaming for a casino. Um, the first and last points there are actually quite linked.
Yeah,
So it's quite interesting that although I didn't finish all those studies, um, the role that I have now obviously is quite heavily influenced by psychology and study. So it still scratches that little bit of an itch for me, but sadly, I
I
don't get to approach customers through the lens of being a psychologist, which I think is what I wanted
Yeah,
at the time.
and I think sometimes it's good to combine stuff. Okay, you do your because for many years, I was doing my day job in the gambling industry, and then my evening job, I was seeing clients. I'm still seeing clients now. But there's something that is nice to have. Different stuff going. Okay, and how you say that you work in different companies. For which other gambling companies have you worked for?
The first operator I worked for when I came to Malta was quite a smaller
Mhm.
operator called NRR Entertainment. I'm not sure of the status of the company at the moment. It's been quite a while
Okay.
since I had any connection with them. After that, I worked for one of the big companies, Paddy Power Betfair.
Yeah,
After that, I moved to LNO, where I've been for the last 8 or 9 years.
yeah. I mean, you have been a long time there. I remember, like maybe like three years ago, I went to your offices and we spent some time together. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a lovely company.
yeah.
I don't know what it would take for someone to take me out of this company, to be honest.
Look, I think sometimes if you're in a nice place, don't go. Because sometimes they offer you more money, more. But then it can be a bit bullshit. Then you're really
Absolutely.
comfortable in a place where you're valued, and then you go to another place, and then it's like, oh no, you just check the box. You cannot be creative. This is the only thing that you can. So I always say, look, if you're happy, don't stay where you are. When you're unhappy, try other stuff.
It's advice
And
that I give to people within the company as well. Obviously, you don't want to dissuade them from exploring other
yeah,
opportunities, but it's very common to see job mobility in the gaming industry and people bouncing from operator or supplier to another, and eventually landing somewhere which they don't like, whether that's sooner or later. And yeah, as you were saying, I think when it comes to like the recruiters reaching out to you and stuff like that, some of the offers are quite substantial. But it triggers a bit of a red flag in my head. The bigger the offer, the higher it is above market. There's a reason for that, I'm sure.
I end up realizing that you say, okay, you paying a price.
Of
So
course.
nothing is free. Or sometimes you have tennis table, playstations and all that, but it's a bit like decoration because you don't have time to sit. It's a bit like, okay, so I start
Yeah,
at
no time.
7, I finish at 7. The last thing that I want is to play
Yeah,
tennis
that's
table.
true. And it requires a company like something like a ping pong table or a pool table. It requires like a level of company culture for people to actually engage and use those. Like I've worked for some companies in the past where they have all of these things, and like you said, it's mostly window dressing. There was never anyone up there using it because there was no company culture of like socialization within the organization.
Yeah, going to socialization, how, for people that they don't know Malta, how, because you get companies and companies, and normally there's a lot of stuff going on, there's a lot of events, a lot of things going on. uh, could you tell us a little bit about, I don't know, like the vibe, you know
The vibe in Malta? Well, right now it's very
yeah.
hot. It's very hot, so I've
Okay.
got a fan right next to me blasting me at point blank range. Otherwise, you'll see very shiny skin getting progressively worse throughout this podcast. No, I
uh,
love it here in Malta. It's very relaxed. It's got a very Southern European feel to it. Coming from the UK, it feels a lot less, I'd say, like regimental, less hand holding, which I personally enjoy. I love the warm weather. To go out for a swim and socialize with um, people from LNL or from other companies within the industry or outside of the industry, to be honest with you. It's a small island and it's a small
mm,
industry. So you end up bumping into the people you know very often. And there's basically no excuse to ever bail on a plan because even if you're on the other end of the island, it's only a short cab ride away, which
yeah,
definitely helps.
you get a bolt, and you're there
That's right.
in
Yeah.
15 minutes max. Uh, I remember that we bumped into each other at iGaming Next, I say, oh, I haven't seen you in a conference, because, I don't know, like for 6 months or something, like
Mm.
speaking, you say, oh, I'm a bit tired, it's been like, you know, with the same people talking about the same stuff, and then I was thinking, oh shit, maybe I'm talking always about the same stuff.
Definitely. If it was about you, Pedro, I wouldn't have said it to your face for sure. I'm kind of shy like that.
Nah, you
No,
can
just
you can
kidding.
tell me, I'm fine. So
But
it's not me.
I will say, it's definitely not you. And to be honest, it's no it's nothing bad on the conference organizers themselves either. I think there's only so much content you can really do, but there must be 5 or 6 events minimum a year that like I would usually attend, and a lot of them come in like clusters. So I don't know, in February you'll have three, and then in June
Mm,
you'll have three, and then you won't have anything else for the rest of the year. And then when you start
mm,
seeing the same people, I saw them last Monday, I'm now seeing them this Monday, I'll see them next Monday. it it does get a bit samey. And to
yeah.
be honest, I don't really remember the last time I saw a really, really, really insightful and fresh piece of content at one of these bigger conferences. To be honest with you, um, perhaps it's just down to the size and how mainstream they've become. It's tough to say.
you know, I get, what you say, 'cause sometimes, I get, like organizers and say, oh, let's talk about collaboration, and it's like, oh man, I can do another panel about collaboration. Have been talking for the last 10 years about this, and sometimes not much is happening. Yeah, we're going to collaborate on this. Okay, we have a research project. Do you want to collaborate? I spoke with compliance, and they said that if it's not mandatory, we're not going to do it. That's man.
Yeah, hands are kind of tied at that point, right? I think.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, I don't know, 'cause sometimes, I feel that, companies, they're afraid, of doing any, collaboration or research. It's a bit like, normal research is quite straightforward. It's okay, what do you want to research? So okay, I don't know, like esports players and, gambling behavior.
Mm.
Normally they're not going to, then write about something else. It's just going to say, okay, this type of player, they tend to bet on this, and then they do that, and they have this risk when we do a PGSI, and then they may write in, you know little print somewhere that you help, or they got the data from this company. 'Cause I think
Yeah, I think the
sometimes
same.
it's
I was just going to say, I think the same thing occurs even when I do like a panel at one of these conferences. To be honest, um, in the compliance and SG arm of the industry, we can be a bit cautious. I wouldn't say with what we say, but well, yeah, no, it is with what we say. To be honest, no one wants to be the outlier um, and saying something completely outlandish with such a sensitive topic. There is room for creativity in the industry with regards to safer gaming because of self-regulation. But truthfully, I don't see much of that brought up um, in at these conferences, in these panels. I'd quite like to see a session which is just titled, "What are you doing that goes beyond regulator expectations?" Um, Otherwise, you just end up regurgitating regulatory guidance and things that you've been forced to do, and there's no room for creativity there. When you go to see the commercial panels about marketing and like affiliation, people there seem to have more room to be creative in what they say, um, because it doesn't have such a potential negative impact, I don't think.
Okay, but I think, I never have heard anything really outlandish. Nobody say, "Oh yeah, we send, I don't know, like a crate of vodka, to the players, to cheer them up when they're depressed." It's like,
Yeah, that's probably not a great idea.
yeah, so I never have heard anything that's, oh my god, this is terrible. Normally, something like quite bland, or you go sometimes to panels, people that be like, oh, what they don't say anything, and then the next person, what do you? And oh, I agree. Okay, do you agree with someone that didn't say anything?
That is true. It is quite hard to disagree. Another thing with
Yeah,
like given the talks about SG, it's quite hard to disagree because everyone wants the same thing. Ultimately, we all want the customers to be protected. We all want fair regulation. Um, so it's quite hard to have a disagreement there outside of like your particular approach, which, like I said, people don't seem to take too much of like a uh, creative approach with regards to SG, speaking generally, to be honest, when compared to stuff like marketing.
okay, if you could do anything, so imagine that you got your CEO and say, "Oh, I listened to the, BetTALker podcast, and I realized that you have a bit your hand tied, So I'm going to give you a carte blanche to do whatever creative stuff that you want to do. What would be a wild thing to do?"
A wild thing. If I can
Oh,
involve other parts of like other elements that are involved in like the customer journey with regards to SG, it would be some means of like better communication with the banks, some program that helps the banks uh, facilitate a single customer view. I think there's a few too many moving components there, but if there was something like I see the Gambling Harms Action Lab between the banks and the operators, I think that would be amazing. In terms of what LNL can just do, I think more more creativity with regards to limits, having customers being able to set like customizable limits on kind of any metric of their gambling that they'd like outside of the generic ones, facilitating, net and gross amounts, specific periods, times of day, perhaps excluding certain days of the month from when they're able to play, perhaps like payday, to avoid like spending, like any windfalls that they might have received, stuff like
that
that.
that's what we do at BetBlocker. We got
Yeah,
this calendar feature, and you
sales pitch
can,
for you guys.
yeah, you don't even have to develop it. You just put our link on the website.
And that's why we were
Okay.
so happy to help you with
Yeah,
the
no,
Dutch
no.
language stuff.
You have been helping for a long time. Actually, you guys translated Dutch.
It
Yeah,
was, yeah, I think it was back in, it's a few years ago now, 2021. It was still like an emerging regulated market at that time. But yeah, we were very happy to do that because I think you're one of the only ones that I've seen, or perhaps the only one I've seen that offers the service for free, which
yeah.
obviously requires operator funding. There's quite a big roadblock between like consumers wanting to pay money to exclude themselves from gambling, and GamStop, for all of its worth, can be kind of avoided, and especially with regards to the black
I
market.
mean, it's a difficult situation because the if a player is in a tough spot, you know, a don't have a penny when they're in crisis. They have max everything they got, or B, if they still have money, rather than paying like a subscription of £30 or whatever, the probably say, okay, I'm going to have another go. So I think, you know, it's all this sort of things should be always free. I also think that you know the secret of BetBlocker, is also that because we don't ask for any data or anything, you just click and download. You don't need to, hey, can you give me activation code? The person get the email the next day, send it, and then the person is, oh, I changed my mind, because gamblers, sometimes they have this sort of relationship, that can be, can vary a lot. 1 minute, I'm done. The next day, actually, I can, juggle some money around. So I think, to be able to, uh, you know, sort it out. When it's, strike while the iron is hot.
Of
It's
course,
it's
yeah.
quite important.
Yeah, you'd
Um,
be removing the possibility for those with the most vulnerability, right? The most financial vulnerability from using your service if there's a paywall, no matter how small it might be. And
yeah.
going back to the data you mentioned, it's quite interesting what you said because, in my perspective, the data that's collected, I use GamStop for example, is actually the main flaw in how people can circumvent the system itself. So you're taking all this information from the customer, um, name, date of birth, email address, stuff like that. And then if they tweak those, you know, it's 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 not impossible to get around it. And that's not even talking about the issues with the black market as well.
So it's, I mean, nothing is perfect. The reality is that BetBlocker is not perfect either. You can, just buy a new phone and that's it. Or wipe, your computer to factory settings. What happened? That you don't want
Mm,
to spend like 1 hour installing Windows or your apps. You buy, you know, but then it's like, okay, you try to go, you block, say, okay, you know what, I better leave it, or and then
mm,
next day, oh, I'm, good that, you know that stopped me from burning my fingers, but at the end of the day, this sort of thing, if someone is, you know ultra committed, there's
of course.
nothing that can be done,
No, I think that's why I know some operators in the industry they're very keen on say taking zero money from anyone that's suffering from gambling harms, and it's an honourable mission, but it's quite unrealistic to be honest with you. I think you try your best to take as little as you can and none from those that have the most capacity for harms. But in truth, like you said, if someone's really dedicated to circumventing something, then they will. They will.
and I think, okay, it's a noble slogan, but it feels a bit markety. It's a bit like,
I
okay,
agree.
we're going to make beer healthy, or that doesn't cause harm. It's like, not sure. Even
Good
if you
luck with
go
that. Yeah.
running, which is healthy, you can, get with a bad knee, or something like that. So it feels a bit markety, but I suppose that this honorable goal, or a
It
bit of,
is. If it's seen mostly as like an ethos, right, and not an
yeah.
actual achievable goal, then I respect that completely. If what they're trying to say is that they'll never stop making new implementations to protect people, then that's amazing, which I think is probably what they're getting at. But yeah, it does feel a bit more like a slogan at the moment, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking with a friend the other day, and she was telling me about a, uh, I don't know if you heard about it. It's like, actually was a fashion person, from Sweden, that was really famous, and he lost a lot of money with Kindred, and then he wanted to start a crypto casino with, you know porn king empire,
Mm.
whatever. Was a bit of a bit like, that doesn't sound, that sounds a bit like a recipe for disaster, with an adjuan or something licensed. Like, yeah, I don't think.
No, I agree. On the subject of that, I think matching like two harmful products, I think even um, Pornhub themselves even gave it a go and made a casino at some point. But I think matching two potentially harmful uh, things together is, like you said, a recipe for disaster. That's why we keep an eye out for people that might be under the influence of drugs, alcohol, when they're in contact with us, because those things marry up and create awful results a lot of the time.
I didn't know that there was a Pornhub casino. How does it work?
Well, I've never been on the website ever, so I couldn't tell you. Just kidding. But I think the gimmick was basically that they had some live presenters that you would have seen in some of their more notable content, perhaps.
Like adult
Yeah, exactly,
actress croupier or something like that?
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a bit seedy, you know.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, and did they close or something, or they still open?
Truthfully, I haven't
No.
heard anything about it
Okay.
for a while, so I think it might have stopped. But I wouldn't quote me on that.
But I suppose that there's a bit of sort of I don't know, be like, if there's something that is successful, okay, maybe they won't do it because they're getting maybe a bit of heat from the regulator, but you may have another website that say, okay, let's do, I don't know, OnlyFans casino or
Mm,
whatever.
I'm sure we're pretty close to something like that, to be honest with you. And if they did close, which again I can't say for sure that it did, it will come back in a different form on some black market site. I'm sure that doesn't really have to um, deal with the regulators at all and can just ignore any kind of cease and desist letters that they might receive.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I remember that there was something with a steak and a adult entertainment
Yes.
actress or something, because there was they what do you remember what happened? Because I never really.
Yeah, my understanding is that Stake, it was quite a clever marketing trick, to be honest with them. If you're looking at just from a marketing lens, it was pretty genius. They'd basically take viral videos that you'd see circulating on social media, funny clips, memes, things like that, and they just slap a stake like watermark on the bottom, basically, and then distribute that back into the virality of the post. So eventually that would gain traction, and then people would watch the clips for the content in the clip, which would be something funny or insightful. But at the bottom, it would be branding for stake. And whether they did it intentionally or it was done through AI, perhaps, they ended up basically slapping a watermark onto, I think, an adult performer's uh, video material of some kind. I don't think it was
Mhm.
actually adult content, but yeah, something that wasn't adult content that was posted by an adult performer. I think the Gambling Commission caught wind of that, and that was probably, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back. I think a lot of us in the regulated space were quite surprised that Stake managed to kind of get away with that for as long as they did.
Okay, you know, I don't know because I'm quite of a liberal person, and sometimes like gambling, having a go, at porn, feels a bit like, okay, what do you think?
People should be allowed to do what they want, but there should be some checks and balances and safeguards for people. So in the case of the stake advertisement, if they had a license, they'd at least have to follow. If they had like a UK license, for example, they'd at least have to follow um, some rules that would basically have stopped that from being the case, being possible.
So
Uh,
I
but
suppose maybe they were putting the clip on Instagram or TikTok or something, was not like in an adult site.
Exactly. Yeah, it was circulated on social media, which would like has basically like no age verification, so
Okay.
younger people could have seen it. And I think unfortunately, with the way the internet and like social media is set up at the moment, the bulk of those kind of viral clips that had the watermark put on were basically prime content for younger people, not older people. So that was likely the basis of the Gambling Commission's decision. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think about social media? Being age gated. Because you see research. And it's
Mm,
like, okay, it seems that you know it's not very healthy. It has like negative
yeah.
impact, in young people. Yes, okay, why, can you not do like age verification, like It's
Mm,
done in the gambling industry. Okay, you want to have an account of Instagram or Snapchat or
mm,
TikTok or
mhm.
Facebook. Okay, you need to check your ID, check your face.
Yeah. From my memory, in recent months, perhaps in the last year, there was a country or countries plural perhaps that implemented something like this. I don't know how they go about actually verifying it, but I my understanding is that they were banning social media for I believe under 16s.
I think
Um,
Australia, or something else.
yeah, I can't recall. It was a sort of Western country, I believe.
Okay.
But I couldn't say for sure. But yeah, the interesting thing there is I believe the age they picked was around 16. I don't know if that's particularly helpful, to be honest. I think like people's kind of people's brain doesn't fully develop until their 20s ish,
Yeah.
somewhere in their 20s. So to pick 16 or under feels a bit arbitrary. And to go back to a previous point you made, yeah, if someone's really wanting to get a Facebook account, um, I don't see much that you could do to stop them from doing it. In fact, I think when I made my first Facebook account that I still use today, it basically wouldn't let you make it if you were under a certain age. So you just lie and put like 3 more years, um, three 3 more years on your date of birth, to get around
That's
that.
it.
There weren't any checks and balances, and I don't see that really changing. I think the interesting thing about social media to me is it rings. It has a similar ring to the gambling industry in terms of product design, where it's very obvious, especially with something like TikTok um, and Instagram, with like the short content, lots of like audio and visual stimuli. Like it's meant to be addictive. It's meant
I
to be addictive.
mean, I actually deleted it from my phone because I never use it that much, and then I go, one day, just it feels like spinning, because you just
Mm.
spin, and like, oh, just
I will say
better.
they have done some things like akin to what the gambling industry has done. So my partner, I see her scrolling on Instagram a bit, and then
uh
out of the blue, she'll get a pop up that says you've reached your time limit, and it will kick her out. It will kick
Oh,
her out of
really?
everything. I think that
I think
was
that's that.
Instagram. Facebook probably has the same thing, and WhatsApp. So there are
Okay.
some like actual tools and limits that people can use, but I didn't know that they even existed. So I think this is probably akin to the kind of RG tools issue that we had, 10 years ago, where they existed but no one used them.
Okay, but this is something because, for example, I didn't know that work on on social media. But I remember maybe around 10 years ago, I had a therapy client, and he was having a problematic relationship with shopping, and I said, oh, out of curiosity, I'm going to talk with the customer service on Amazon or whatever. Hi, my name is Pedro. I have a person that I know that is struggling with this. Is there any way to put a limit of what you're buying, or the time that you spend on this? Because sometimes the thrill is not just buying, it's comparing products, reading the reviews. Shall I do this? Then the unboxing,
Mm.
and there was nothing, and I was, oh, can I speak with your compliance team? And they didn't reply, and I found it a bit like, oh my god, this is outrageous. You ask to speak with someone from compliance or a manager, and they just drop your you know I say, okay, at least in the gambling industry, when somebody wants, or my experience, when someone complains and wants to escalate something,
Mm.
you have to escalate it, and you have to deal with this sort of stuff. But I was a bit surprised, that okay, not only they don't have anything that you want to, have a chat with someone, they're like, nah, you're not talking with anyone.
Well, yeah, I
Now,
think once you've worked in like the gambling industry or any kind of like compliance field for a while, and especially you like as a psychologist, Pedro, you probably realize like everywhere you look, every kind of industry in the world is tailored to kind of be addictive and take the most money from you as possible in a sense of, okay, something's on a discount, it's not £10, it's 9.99. Okay, so I'll buy that because it's 9.99, it feels less than £10. That's already a kind of trick that they play on you. Um,
mm,
then you go to like order it online, and the minimum delivery is like £10. Okay, so now I need to buy something else. The cheapest thing is like
Some
5.99.
socks.
Yeah, exactly. That's the cheapest thing you can find. So you end up paying more, not less. So
Mm,
yeah, they definitely have got pretty creative with how they
yeah,
get you thinking on these things.
I mean, I have a beef, for example, with video games and stuff, because when I was a kid, back when the dinosaurs were, roaming the air. Yeah, and you have a video game, you buy a video game, and you have it. Now you have like the game, the expansion, the currency, the add-ons, and it's like,
Yeah,
okay, and for an adult, I think it's okay, but for kids, I really think that should be, you know gated. So, okay, so if you want
yeah.
to buy this, you need to be 18. If not, you just play the plain game.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think my first exposure to any form of gambling, and I can only say this now in hindsight because at the time I did not view it as gambling whatsoever, was watching friends of mine buying FIFA like
If I,
packs. Yeah, basically like for those who don't know, like essentially Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! You buy random cards, and then you can use those cards in the game to like build your team and then challenge other people's teams. So it becomes very much a whoever pays the most money gets the best team and therefore wins the game. And that
play
was
to win,
hyper targeted to like, I think we were maybe 14 or 15 at the time. No one had their own money. So, it was always their mum's or dad's like bank card that was being abused. And some of them must have spent thousands. And then next year, the next game comes out. None of that works on the new game. So you have to start the process all over again. um, and I think that was my first like introduction to any form of gambling.
I think monetize minors shouldn't be, and it's like, okay, so I work in gambling. I recognize when I see gambling, even if you cannot withdraw anything. The
Mm,
mechanics, they're very similar. Maybe it's a technicality, but
yeah,
I think because I remember a few years ago the gambling commission was looking into loot boxes and stuff, but I don't know what happened at the end. I think that they sort of
yeah. I
step
think they left it.
down and say, look, this is not up for us to regulate. Probably they had enough on their plate.
No, I agree, and I think the only country I can think of top of my head that did do something about it was Belgium.
Belgium, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
Belgium.
don't
I think they
know,
banned it for under 18s or something like that.
but I suppose that must be really difficult, for a country to fight. Yeah, I don't know, like EA or something like that. That okay, we value at the GDP of your country or something
Yeah.
like this.
That's true, and I'm sure they just find another way to make it materialize in the games anyway. So okay, you can't buy basically like an RNG pack of some description, but yeah, okay, give us money and you'll unlock something. It's not a gamble, but it's a paid. You pay for the experience of the game
Something. Yeah.
outside of just the initial kind of payment that you make, and yeah, you can tell how much they've kind of got this from the gambling industry. There's coins instead of real money, lots of like flashy indicators and sound effects and just like stimuli everywhere, and you can tell that it's meant to be addictive. And yeah, like I said, I think Belgium was the only place that I know of that has it. In fact, I think I saw a clip from this podcast. uh, the person from Deal Me Out had a similar situation where they would gamble in RuneScape, I
Yes,
believe.
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know some people that have done that as well, where the currency in game has a real equivalent to real life money, so people can gamble with the coins outside of the game. I know there was a big scandal about Counter Strike as well. CoffeeZilla, famous
And
YouTuber, did a big video
Roblox or
on it.
something like this with the
Roblox as
V-Bucks.
well. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Do you think that, yeah, I don't know, like ever another regulator said, look, that's not right. Games, they need to be games.
I it feels unrealistic to me just because the games are sold worldwide. So unless they had some kind of universal regulator for all video games, no matter where they were developed, I don't really see that happening, to be honest.
But I suppose that okay, so imagine, I don't know. So if you believe in Topic or whatever, okay, your game is your FIFA is wild, and if you live, I don't know, in any European country, okay, so if you under 18, I suppose that they may have, you
Mm,
know, ways, to say, okay, so if we cannot sell FIFA in Europe, then we're going to, okay, we may not get that amount of money, but we still get
mm.
60%. Okay, still good
Yeah, I can see it
business.
happening in like certain jurisdictions, like in the EU or somewhere like that. But yeah, just not globally, which is a shame.
Mm.
So I think it will always be in there at some place or another.
Okay. Uh, uh, I don't know what to say, that got a bit blank. Uh,
Was that so inspirational it left you
yeah, the
gobsmacked?
muse just left. Okay. What is your view on experts by experience?
You mean lived experience in the
Yeah.
industry? There's always a place for those with lived experience. So I would never say a bad word about them. And the guys from Epic, for example, that I've met, all of them are just like lovely people,
Mm,
and they don't seem to harbor any ill will against the industry. That's the kind of lived experience that I like to explore, to be honest, because you're getting like an unbiased view. Um, and speaking about it negatively, I think the only thing I can really say is that quite a lot of people that have lived experience, their lived experience is from like kind of a bygone era, 20 years ago, where like it's not really relevant anymore, to be
mm,
honest with you. It sounds a bit cold, but the more
yeah.
recent the lived experience, the more applicable it's going to be um, to the industry.
I mean, I get what you mean. You get, people, maybe, they haven't gambled for 20 years when they stop, and they're talking like, what happened 20 years ago was what is happening now. It's been like, okay, my first car, had an accident and didn't have ABS or
Mm,
anything,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, so now if you buy a car, they're going to have like a lot of, you know, pyrotechnic bells,
Yeah,
airbags, and that. So it's, I know what you mean. Sometimes it'll be like, okay, now you cannot go into a bookies when you're 16. Even if you have a beard, or
it's
maybe you
true.
can. I don't know.
To use the car analogy, which is a good one, yeah. I guess the people that suffer gambling harms and have lived experience, there the issue was they were driving too fast, to use your analogy. And if they had the seatbelt or they'd had, some mechanisms for protection, it would have eased the suffering, but not completely negated it. Which is why the lived experience will always be valuable. It's just hard to take 2 decades old lived experience where the issue is, them using credit, which you can no longer do, them doing autoplay, which you can no longer do. Little things like this that add quite a lot of context to the situation seems to be missing from those that have like historical legacy sort of lived experience.
Yeah, because sometimes you hear about credit, and it's like, I mean, like in my 15 years, that was before that. I said, oh yeah, they just give you credit. And I said, I never have, or that I've been aware.
Mm,
I don't, and I mean, I suppose that maybe in some places, I don't know, like a casino, if you know that you're wealthy or whatever, they make, like brick and mortar in somewhere, they may give you a line of credit in Monaco
mm.
or something like that. No, I don't know. Uh, you mentioned that you were never too gambling inclined. Have you ever, like, I don't know, like living in Malta? I remember, that my staff, when I work in a company, they used to say, okay, like, we just plug the laptop to the big screen at home, and we just have some things, to spin, and we'll get something, we go in and party, and if not, we just stay at home and drink. Have
Mm.
you been involved on any, like, sort of
Yeah,
party
I've gambled.
gambling?
I've gambled. Yeah, I have gambled. When I came to work in the industry for the first time, I can safely say I'd never gambled, not in the kind of um, way that you'd expect. I've made like some friendly bets. So I had a social poker game with some friends, very low stakes. But I'd never really gambled in like the fundamental way that people would probably suspect. Now that I've been in Malta and in the industry for a few years, yeah, I've gambled a bit, pretty much exclusively in Casino Malta, land-based venue here.
Mhm.
Um, and I just kind of, I'll go in, I'll do exactly what we recommend to our customers. I'll take a little bit out. Probably not going to take my bank card with me. Um, let's say, I don't know, €100 or something. I'll go to Casino Malta and I'll have a little play around. Because I do see the entertainment value in it. And the entertainment value does come from the thrill of winning and losing, to be honest. So you trying to kind of get that playing with like tokens online for free with no real risk or stake. It's just never going to give you that insight into how gamblers feel. Something
Mhm.
else I find quite interesting about the industry is, like I said, when I moved to Malta, if I had an opinion on gambling as a whole, it was just the taboos that you see in the news back in the UK. Um, and you might even think that it's just a scam, to be honest with you. A lot of people think that and say that. I hear it quite often. But coming to Malta and working for the operators that I did, almost all of the senior management and some in like the entry level positions, they gamble themselves. They know exactly how the products work. They're using their own money and they play themselves. And I think that's kind of a testament to the fact that gambling isn't a scam, because I wouldn't see any equivalent, like insurance scam calls that you get where they'd call themselves and fall for their own scam. They know
Mhm.
exactly how the games work and that they're quite likely to lose, and
Okay,
they
but
can kind of benefit
how,
from the advice they give customers too.
have you heard about this sort of double switch? I mean, like people in theory they know one thing, but then they do it. I mean, you may know that, I don't know, like alcohol is bad and da, 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 da. I mean, I'm not comparing, but people say, okay, I know that it's unhealthy, but I'm still going to have beer.
Yeah,
So people may know, okay, I know the odds, you know, that if I play, uh, you know, infinite times, I'm guaranteed that I'm going to lose. But I'm just going to have some fun because in my experience, I have seen a lot of people, in the gambling industry, and some of them in senior positions, that they were struggling with gambling themselves. That
mm,
they know very well how things work, but they still do it sometimes in an unhealthy way. Small
yeah.
percentage, but you know, you know, uh, what do you make out of it? Have you ever had a colleague that you like? Oh, it's a bit.
Anytime I lose any money on anything or spend money on anything, it stings. So I can
Mm,
relate to that feeling. But I can say that for myself, I wouldn't say I've ever gambled to the extent where like it's been harmful in any way.
mhm,
I'm quite clear cut about that. That being said, just taking L&L for example, while I won't name any names, we have like a variety of gamblers that work within the company. You have some that do sporadic sports betting on games and teams that they know quite a lot about. There go, it's quite a uh, safe bet, to be honest. And we have people that if I was to gamble as much as they did with the kind of stakes that they do and on the kind of games that they do, to me personally, that would feel harmful. But when I speak to them about it, um, they don't see it that way, and they're very conscious of how they play. They have their limits and they have their way of moderating it. I think it's just down to personal preference that I wouldn't choose to do it in the manner that they do.
and I suppose that there's a lot of activity that they're dangerous. Okay, I don't know, like, okay, you want to do like kite surfing. Okay, there's a lot of people that they harm themselves, they go too high, and then they break a leg, or
Yeah.
if you're into cars, okay, you may end up having an accident. And it can be very serious. Some stuff have some level of risk. I suppose that sometimes how things are being marketed, perhaps. I think maybe in the old days, maybe the marketing was a bit irresponsible. Now things are getting a little bit better.
No, I agree. And going back to the colleagues that I have at LNL, I think they're in a sort of like unusual and unique position when it comes to their gambling, because some of their gambling is actually getting insights into the products that we're offering our customers, and in order to understand what your customers like journey is going to be like, you need to be a customer yourself. You can't make a gambling business fit for gamblers if you don't know what gambling feels like. There go like thereby spending your own money and playing the games. I wouldn't know the first thing about what games to bring onto the website with my relatively limited understanding of all of the functionality of the slots, for example. But we have people in the company that they play it for fun and they explore it and they speak to the game providers. And I think you could look at that from two sides, which is it's helpful for the business, but it could also be kind of at their own detriment, to be honest. Someone that might be more likely to suffer harms um, down to the constant exposure.
Mm. Uh, so imagine that you had a colleague that was experiencing harm. Would they know what to do? Would they come to you? Would they go to HR? Would they just say, "Oh, better keep my mouth shut"?
They know what to do. We offer free counselling through the
Hmm.
company. It's anonymous, or they can come to us. Our HR manager, Vichka, is lovely, so I don't think anyone would be hard pressed to go and chat to her or anyone else. We have an open door policy.
Hmm.
Everyone is very friendly with each other, and those that gamble, you'll find them in every position within the company. Um, from top down. So there's a lot of people that would understand, and it would be a judgment-free zone. We have had some like internal trainings about the exposure that the employees have to gambling, so it's definitely accounted for, and it's not something that we've really seen uh, take place yet. Thank God. In
No,
terms of
it's
someone
good. It's
actually
good. I
suffering
mean, if
harms.
you have the things in place, okay, you have free counseling on someone that is going through a difficult situation. I don't know, anxiety, stress, depression, that may end up using gambling as a coping mechanism. Okay, they can talk directly about the problems. Okay, you know tackle it before
Yeah.
it's a snowball. Yeah.
It's an
Uh,
interesting question as well, because when I think about it, us being based in Malta means that we're kind of under the MGA regulations, which in terms of like safer gaming is a lot more kind of like relaxed than the UK is.
mhm,
So it's quite interesting where you could make a case that the UK market, some people say it's over-regulated, for example. Um, but just thinking about that, if we had an office in the UK and someone was to be suffering harms or gambling, I would feel more comfortable with them gambling under the regulations of the UK than of the MGA. I'll be honest. Down to the
yes.
protections. You could also make a case that people wouldn't gamble in the UK because of those protections and might gamble somewhere else, like the black
Okay.
market.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, because you heard a lot of people that say, okay, overregulation is driving people to the black market. How do
Yeah.
you find the balance? Okay, so we protect players,
Yeah.
to the extent that it's fine, um, but we know, or do you think, because for years, sometimes, we have been talking
Mm,
about this. I mean, maybe like 5 years now, and until the
mm,
last couple of years have been something that
yeah.
it was perceived a bit like, oh, just the industry crying wolf and all that.
Yes.
And it's a bit
Um,
like, it's glad, I'm glad that it's something that now is taking the spotlight, but it feels a bit like, okay, this would have been better if you don't wait forever
mm,
until you do something.
that's true. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, like we found some of our customers to be playing on black market sites, and we see it in the documentation they send over. We'll always assess that as an issue and speak to them about it. We won't
Oh.
obviously tell them not to do it outright. That's not really our place, but we will explain to them the risks. But it's quite common, especially for the bigger bigger customers, those that want to play higher amounts, that they will play with at least a regulated site and an unregulated site at the same time. They'll play usually with the regulated site up until they hit whatever limits they've set or the operators imposed, and then the rest. And to be honest, it's usually the bulk of the funds seem to be directed to some crypto type casino where they don't have any kind of payment limits, or
Okay,
KYC or EDD. So I can tell you that definitely is a thing, speaking kind of
that's
anecdotally.
that's very interesting because it's the first time that I hear that actually an operator does a little bit of informative intervention. Like say,
Mm,
okay, when you send the payslip, we saw that you're making deposits here.
mm,
Do you know that this casino is not regulated in your
yep,
jurisdiction? Do you know that?
yep.
What sort of intervention? How does it look like?
Well, we'll always have something to tell the customer after reviewing their documentation that we get as part of like the enhanced due diligence process. It's
Hmm.
quite a long process. We get quite a lot of data as a result of that. So we'll always have something to say to the customer, either just discussing what kind of limits we think might be appropriate for them, discussing any kind of concerns we might have observed, like payday loans, gambling with a lot of operators, whether they're regulated or not. And if we do spot the unregulated, all we can really do is try to inform them of some of perhaps the horror stories that we might have heard in the industry, about an unregulated site or another. In truth, some of them don't seem to be scam artists. They do pay people out, they do offer good customer service, they do have tools, and they just wanted to avoid the game restrictions that something like the Gambling Commission has imposed. But you'll never really know until you want to withdraw, right? So it's hard to
Okay.
say, it's hard to give a definitive answer to what we'd say to a customer, but we'll always just make them aware of some of the things that we've heard.
Could you tell me a horror story that you mentioned?
A horror
From the
story.
black
Well,
market. Yeah.
yeah, we're quite active on Casino Meister, which is like a
Hmm.
forum for players, right? And you only have to look on there for 5 seconds to see lists upon lists of rogue casinos, usually crypto related, um, rogue outfits where people have deposited hundreds of thousands. They go to withdraw maybe a fraction of that, and it's taken. They're not paid out. Their complaints aren't handled. They obviously have no recourse to like a disputes resolution service or anything like that. Um, Targeting GamStop customers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Uh, Luckily, the customers that we've had ourselves, that we've seen playing for unregulated sites, we haven't really directly heard anything about them not being paid out. We've had a lot of people that have said that their withdrawals are being delayed, you know, um,
Mm.
but no one that hasn't actually been paid out. But yeah, like I said, you only need to really look on Casino Meister at a cursory glance, and you'll see lots.
Uh, you also mentioned, and I do understand it, in the sense that okay, if they have less, you know, I don't know, like regulatory requirements. Okay, to start with, they can get rid of, the compliance department,
Yep.
or they do less checks. Okay, they don't need like a risk department, or they have it smaller,
Yep.
or okay, they don't handle like customer support,
Hmm.
on a reasonable time. Okay, instead of having 50 people, they can have
Hmm.
three guys.
Yep.
uh, but maybe you know some appealing, are bonus bigger, are
Yes.
better offers.
Yeah. All of the above. So they're definitely doing some cost saving in terms of what kind of staffing they're going to need. Um, Maybe there are some out there, but I've never seen a responsible gaming department for an unregulated site. If they do, it's basically just like written text on the website and no one behind the scenes actually doing anything. But yes, they are definitely bringing in more money as well, by doing some very shady marketing practices like targeting GameStop customers, by being able to offer all the variety of games that you used to be able to get in the UK with all the bells and whistles and features that people like and draw them to those games, whereas we can't. The bonuses can be bigger, and because their terms can be shadier, they can offer whatever kind of bonus they want. And if someone does win, they can just nullify that basically through one kind of weird term or another.
Clause.
Yeah. And then if you complain, who knows if you'll ever hear anything back from that. They don't really have to get back to you if you're a lost customer to them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's. Have you heard about fake games? That you go to a unlicensed casino and they seem to have like real games, but this actually is the same scheme, but
All right.
the RP and all that is different. Have you heard about
No,
that?
that's the first I'm hearing of it in that context. I think when it comes to fake games, what comes to mind for me would be something like I use Stake for an example. A lot of people would say that the streamers that they had at the early stages were playing with like higher RTP than what the customers might actually get when they sign up through their affiliate link or whatever. I've had a lot of talk about that, but not specifically about what you just said.
Okay, have you heard about streamers playing with fake money? Okay,
Yeah,
they just top up
yeah,
the
yeah,
account with then it's a bit of a show.
yeah.
I was thinking about that. It would be nice, if people say, okay, look, this is entertainment. We may realize, but we're not using real money. This is a bit like WWE. We hit you
Mm,
with the chair, but the chair is made of cardboard.
mm. Yeah, they should be able to. They should be forced to say that essentially, or have a disclaimer. But the RTP should be the same. So playing with the fake money on like a 95% RTP slot, that's fine. I think as long as you make it clear. But if it's even if it's real money, if you're manipulating like the RTP to make it seem like you hit a bonus feature every third spin and you
Yeah,
win
no,
incredible sums of money, I think that's where like a lot of the potential risk comes in at that point. Yeah.
mm. I mean, I suppose that this is something that a provider may be able to say, okay, you cannot tweak with the RTP, or
Mm.
because I
I do
suppose
think the Gambling Commission is looking a bit more at providers
okay,
now. Maybe not game providers solely, but solution providers, payment providers that are uh, basically giving their services to the unregulated sites. I don't really know what progress they're making there, but I have heard as much. So
okay, yeah, me too. And lastly, what do you think about because you mentioned Casino Meister, about the role of affiliates, into safer gambling, because have been something, like you know before it used to be only like operators, B2Cs, now you got a lot of B2Bs actually that they focus on safer gambling,
yeah,
and it feels a bit like affiliates have been left aside, and it's something that okay, they got some bad reputation, and it's like okay, maybe they could be, they are in a place, to recommend, okay, this casino, they have
mm,
really good, I don't know if gamblers may be interested in this
yeah.
type of things, but it's just okay, safer gambling, eight stars, or because I don't know, for me it's important, if I get, if I'm driving that my car, has an airbag, or whatever,
Mm.
I suppose that if you're a gambler, you may say, okay, so have
It's a very
some
interesting question. It's definitely a
safety.
part of the industry that, speaking about L&O here, we do basically exclusively affiliate marketing. We don't really do much else. We don't do much SEO. We don't do many like sponsorships or anything like that. So the affiliate part of the industry is obviously something that we're kind of reliant on. Um, that being said, we have like affiliate compliance members within the company whose role is to essentially ensure that the affiliates that we work with are not the non-GamStop sites. We have their KYC. All of the kind of like signposting and stuff is there available on the websites. That's a bit more of like a tick box kind of assessment for those
Mm,
affiliates. There are a few that stand out to me. I think it all started with the POG. I know Duncan from BetBlocker was very involved with that, where they became like a disputes resolution service, and they clearly put some weight behind safer gaming. Casino Guru, we had their awards win quite recently, which we're very proud of, and the fact that they're an affiliate means the award was kind of given by the players, which I quite like. I think I even saw reference to that in like an article recently, but it's not you pay and you win. Um, they looked at it through the lens of the player, and you can see just on an overview of their website, like they rank sites based on like a safety index, which I love.
We, we do work with Casino Guru. We're very fond of Shimon.
Yeah,
Always, I think is the pretty much the first person that start pushing from
of
safer
course.
gambling. From the affiliate, and I
Yeah,
think always he was
and they don't have to, which
into something else. But
makes it stand out more to me, to be
yeah,
honest. And I know they won an award, I think, an SBC award recently
mm,
for like affiliate of the year, something
mm,
like that. And they're a big affiliate, but they're not the biggest affiliate. So
mm,
I'm glad SBC clearly looked at that, not just who has the most traffic wins the award, but who's actually doing and being the most creative affiliate out there, a sustainable affiliate, which Casino Go definitely are. I think they've branched out now into so many different things, complaints handling, reviewing terms and conditions, obviously the regular like kind of affiliation stuff, that it's just become a totally different like entity now, which I love. And the only other one that I can think of is Floris's Better World Casinos.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. But those three really stand out to me. Um, and the fact that they're doing it without being forced to, whereas you could say that operators are, I think that really says a lot, to be honest.
Okay, Matt, I'm conscious of time. Is there anything that you know it's important? How we haven't talked about that. I mean, I'm sure that was something that you wanted to say, or
Yeah, to be honest, I think there was a question that came up earlier with regards to the UK regulations and like potential like how I feel about that, where it's at. Are we too
yeah.
far on like are we overburdening or are we kind of lax in the UK? And I think they're on the right track. Um, I can't disagree with the premise for a lot of their implementations, but I think they're getting a bit too heavy on the game design issues. I understand why, because like we talked about with the social media, they're obviously made to be addictive, you know, and customers know that. It's not new information to them. But every time they make the games less entertaining, they make the regulated industry less entertaining, and it's meant to be entertaining. And you're just going to send people elsewhere um, where they have no protections and no recourse for anything. So if they were to be listening to this, I would just beg them to please cool it on the product changes. I don't think changing like spin time anymore beyond like the 5 second, a few seconds, whatever, um, is that significant in protecting the customer. And I mean, they also kind of conflict as well because they tell us to look out for people that spend a lot of time on the site. But now everyone's going to be spending more time on the site because if they want to spend £100, whereas they could have done it in 10 minutes before, however long, it will now be X amount of minutes longer if they want to play the same amount. Whereas if they go somewhere else, they can buy bonus features, they can autoplay, they can get ridiculous offers and ridiculous like marketing material. Um, so I think that's where they need to cool off. Otherwise, I think they're on the right track.
Okay, fantastic. So, Matt, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye bye.
Bye. Okay, now I'm stopping